Hello and welcome back to Burn Pile. I think last week there were a few glitches with the podcast. I think you might have heard a glitch around the 40-minute mark. Just some weirdness in the recording. I'm not sure exactly what was going on. That episode, it was the first one where I had a big problem technically. OBS, not OBS, but the entire desktop actually crashed 20 minutes into it. Thankfully, those 20 minutes were recorded, but I had to sort of awkwardly stitch it all back together. I don't think that was super noticeable, but then at the 40-minute mark, which would be another 20 minutes, so maybe that's a clue. There was another glitch again. So there's a bit of a desktop environment problem. I know nobody cares about this, but so I apologize if last week you did hear a weird glitch going on. But I'm using a different desktop environment now. I don't think it's going to crash. It never has for me before. And you're wondering what a desktop environment is. When you use Linux, you don't just choose what kind of Linux you're using, but the different kinds of Linux that you have can all have different desktop environments installed. So basically, like what your file manager looks like and how Windows are handled and all that. Um, I was using one called KDE Plasma, which is normally really good and it's very, very easy to use and it looks really good. It's I don't know, it has some quirks I don't like, but they all do. And I include Windows in that. Just as much as you can customize things to be whatever you want on Linux, you also do want some sane defaults. So Plasma was okay, but like I said, it crashed. So I'm using one called GNOME now. Despite everything I just said, Linux is actually amazing to use right now. It is pretty comparable to Windows in difficulty. I don't think Linux is that much harder to use than modern Windows, depending on what you're doing. There is quite a learning curve, but I don't think there's a learning curve because Linux is inherently more difficult than Windows. I think there's a learning curve just because we all grew up using Windows, or most of us did. Even if you were like a Mac family, you probably had to use Windows in school. At least people my age did. I'm in my mid 30s. So when Windows does something weird, or you can't get Windows to do exactly what you want, or you really struggle with something, or you learn about some quirk in it and everything, you kind of just you did all that 10 years ago. You've been dealing with some quirk or weirdness for 10 years and you have all these workarounds. And when it crashes, you don't even remember it. And then when you try something new and it has some quirk, something that's not exactly what you want, then it really sticks out to you. And so that's where the learning curve comes from. At this point, I've used Linux off and on for a really long time, probably like 15 plus years. But I've been using it consistently as my main home desktop operating system for probably 5 or 6 years. And it's usually really, really good. I'm a person who really loves single player gaming. And because of what's gone on with Valve and Proton, you can just play almost every game on Linux. And in fact, they have better performance than they do on Windows. Because Windows has added so much bloat, so much tracking and advertising and crap that it's just this huge overhead. So even though games that were written to work in Windows, obviously like it's meant for Windows. It was written with Windows in mind. And even though the Linux version has to go through a translation layer to play because they're not native Linux games, they still run better on Linux, even going through the translation layer, just because Windows has so much crap on top of it. It's really gross. Also, from last episode, you know how I feel about Bill Gates. So Linus Torvalds, as far as I know, I don't think Linus has fucked a single kid. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but he didn't really. Eventually, he made money off of Linux because it was so important that he got like, some easy job where he was hired at some company in Silicon Valley, and then but he was allowed to spend all his time just working on Linux and getting a paycheck from them. And then I believe that Red Hat gave him, uh, they like unilaterally, without him asking, they gave him shares in Red Hat before they went public, and I think that made him a millionaire. And I'm sure there's been a million things since then. That was all a long time ago. But I don't think he didn't get like super, super, super wealthy, at least not as far as I'm aware. So he was probably never really on the radar to go to Little St. James with Epstein or anything. But I could be totally wrong about that. If I'm wrong and he actually has done that, please let me know. Please tell me. But I doubt it. He's a bit of an insufferable faggot sometimes. Like, I think somebody talked about, oh, we got to get rid of like wokeness and Linux or whatever, and he called them gay, which they probably were. He was probably right, but still, you can tell he's probably a big lib cuck. But there's a big difference in the scale of how bad a person can be. There's a huge difference between being a lib cuck uh, and fucking children. I mean, there's a lot of overlap there, but it's a big difference. And of course, Linux is just the kernel, and the operating system itself is different and all that. But nobody cares, fag. Shut up. Just me leaving a little voice note to myself. Maybe I should edit that out of the pod, my conversations with myself. But I guess the pod is my conversations with myself. Anyway, if you wonder how this is recorded, I've said a million times it's just OBS, and obviously it's a PNG tuber type thing if you're watching the video, even though I consider it an audio podcast. But Fedora is the operating system I use. I used a lot of other ones. I started with, I think, Linux Mint. I've tried Ubuntu. I've tried Manjaro. I was running Manjaro for many years, and Manjaro was great in some ways for gaming. It's, I think, what Valve recommends for gaming if you're not using Steam Deck with SteamOS. But I found that Fedora is the most stable with the most updates, and it's the closest to just working every time. So I've really been liking using Fedora. All right, enough with that boring bullshit. Let's get into the news. Let's get into what happened this week, because there is some pretty cool stuff. All right, I want to start with this one. We're going to be going to New Zealand for this story. By the way, I don't know if you've ever dealt with anyone from New Zealand, but it's literally impossible to understand what the fuck they're saying. I live in a country where some of the other white people I meet, there's a chance that they could be from New Zealand. So I have met them a few times. There's only one I would say I really knew that I met like several times. And she was fine. The first week I knew her, like, okay, so I'm in an Asian country where the accents of people who speak in English are sometimes really, really, really bad. Like you just can't figure out what they're saying. They're often good. Don't misunderstand. I'd say the English level is actually often quite good. But sometimes there's like a heavy East Asian accent, which I'm not going to do right now because I'm not racist, you freaks. Okay, this is actually a libcuck podcast. Okay, so I'm not going to do any. Actually, the thing is, if I had a funny like racist East Asian accent impression, I would do it. I just don't think mine's that good, so I'm kind of just I'm milking it. I'm gonna pretend it's for a more noble reason. But the point is the people in this country, like, they don't have perfect English, but you can usually, with some empathy, looking at their face, kind of reading the situation, you can figure out what they're saying. You can get it. They're trying, you're trying, you can make it work. But this lady from New Zealand, I think I met her my first week in this country too. And so I was dealing with, these accents. I was trying to understand what people were saying. I was in a new country and everything. And I could understand her the least out of anyone that I met. Just this white lady from New Zealand. She turns to me and she like says something. And I'm just like, I would just like smile and nod my head, be like, yeah. Like I literally could not understand like a fucking word she said for the first week. I could not understand a word out of her mouth. And then it was like just like that. One day I woke up and suddenly I could understand all of it. And then a few months later, I met another New Zealand person, another New Zealander, and they theirs was even worse. And like I knew I was like 90% of the way there from my other experience, but still, like there was a big gap. And sometimes he would say something, and I would just have no idea what they were saying, what he was saying. It was I remember like I was with someone else and we were supposed to meet up with him, and he he called that person on the phone, and this was a person who spoke completely fluent English that he was talking to, and he called that person on the phone and was talking to them, and she was saying, "Oh yeah, uh-huh, okay, yeah," and then she goes like that for like a minute or two, and then she like puts the phone, to her shoulder like you do when you're covering it up for a second. I don't know if that even works on cell phones, but and she looks at me and she says like, I can't understand anything he's saying, can you please talk to him? And then she hands me the phone, so I take it and I start listening, and I got about like 50% of what he was saying, and I think I made him repeat himself like several times. um I think because I'm an American and because my native language is English, I was less embarrassed about just saying, "Hey, you're gonna have to repeat that. Please repeat that." What? Huh? Okay, could you say again? Like, and then eventually we got to where we could actually meet up with him. But my point is, New Zealand, that's a place, you know. And here's the thing about New Zealand: if someone is not from there and they're claiming to know anything about that place, be very, very skeptical. But you might remember from November, there was this story. There was this really gay little video out of there about their parliament, which I guess they have. And in New Zealand, about 10 people live in New Zealand. Okay, so them having a parliament in and of itself is ridiculous. Like they don't really need a government at all, I don't think. I think you could just like if something's going wrong in the nation of New Zealand, I'm pretty sure how you handle it is you walk outside and you knock on your neighbor's door and you say, like, if there was an issue of like noise pollution in like America, right? Like you know there'd be like a study about it, and there'd be, there'd be a government agency involved, and for God's sakes, there'd be federal and state, and like the noise pollution issue would affect millions of people, and it would need to be solved through this whole bureaucracy. I think if there's a noise pollution issue in like New Zealand, you walk outside your door, you knock on your neighbor's door, and you tell them to keep it down. I mean, there's not enough people for there to be a government or for there to be a parliament or anything. It's not like a real country. I mean, I heard some billionaires have like a little safe house there in case the countries that matter blow each other up or something. So like it has some value in that like nobody knows what it is, so you can build a fortress there. But anyway, they do have a parliament. For some reason, they have a parliament, and they've got their native population there, which they're so gay that they couldn't even kill all their native population like we did in America. They're so stupid. The Europeans who went there, they couldn't even think to bring smallpox blankets to make sure that the land was theirs just for them. That's how retarded these people are. So now they got to deal with this shit. So I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you probably listened to a lot of other podcasts where they all talked about this because it was basically the gayest thing on the internet going on in November. But they do this gay little dance, the natives there, called the Haka. And the Haka, I know some South Africans, and they all think, because they play sort of the fake sports that are played by countries like New Zealand, New Zealand, South Africa, these countries that aren't really countries. They play these kind of made up sports where, there's like a football that's not really a football, or there's a baseball bat that's not really a baseball bat, and there's no black people playing, so it's not really that competitive. And it's like a little hobby, and they'll say like, "Oh, it's a big sporting country," and then but they're talking about these little these little playground games they've invented that aren't really sports, like rugby or whatever. But the South Africans, like, they told me about the Haka, like it's like the coolest thing in the world. It's like, yeah, New Zealand, they're our big rival in rugby or whatever. It's like, okay, here's how it's not a real sport. If New Zealand is your rival in it, then it's not a sport. Nobody cares, fag. But anyway, it's like, oh, our great enemy. This is their highly respectable thing. Before the sports match, they do this traditional dance that's real intimidating. But actually, okay, I'm gonna circle around. I'm gonna tell you why I turned around on the Haka, and how it can be used to actually kick ass. But before we do that, let's review what happened in November. Um, so in their quote unquote parliament, which, again, this is a parliament for to represent like 50 people who live there. So it's not really a parliament. It's you know like what rugby is to like American football. Their The New Zealand parliament is to like Congress or something. But let's watch this gay little thing. They're supposed to be reading a bill. It's real like white people coded, but of course, because it's got to be a democracy or whatever, the natives are there. All right, so let's watch this lady.
Opposed.
So they're supposed to be like debating on the floor, and then this lady like rips up her piece of paper, and then they're doing their gay little dance. Hold on, I'm gonna mute it, but because it's an audio podcast and I want to reward the people who are just listening to audio or not having to look at this. But they're like waving their hands, and they're doing this little thing. um yeah, and it's just like, this is a reminder of why, if you are a white country, if you do want to set up a white country in a new land, bring the smallpox blankets. because this is ridiculous, because your descendants will be dealing with this. Now, as a quick aside, I want to remind everyone that I'm not a Fed, and this native woman here who tore up the paper and is doing the gay little dance, real quick, would I would. She's kind of cute. But so when this happened, of course, everyone who has no idea about New Zealand, people who have never thought about New Zealand, never met anyone from New Zealand, um, which I'm jealous of them. That is a better way to live your life. But they saw this and they just saw someone who wasn't white being obnoxious in front of white people, and they thought, "Oh, I'm on the side of that person." So the worst people in the world were like, "This kicks ass, actually. Look at this. These people are fighting for their right." Meanwhile, they have no idea what this bill is about. I'm sure it's all very complicated. It's some kind of historical issue about whatever. I mean, I read the articles too. I don't really remember. I don't care to reread them. I don't care. Not a real country. Not real people. Who gives a shit? Um, but this was just very gay. The dancing in Parliament, very gay. It sucked ass. Now, I would have told you up until a few days ago when I saw this next story I'm going to show you, I would have told you there was nothing in the world, not a single thing, that could convince me that the Haka was actually good or could actually be cool in any circumstance. But I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. I'm willing to say that, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in my philosophy. Because there is something awesome that actually happened in New Zealand, and it involved the Haka. It's very, very cool. All right. So here we go. Back to New Zealand. This is from the Daily Mail. Headline: Fiery moment, Christian group performing a Haka face down a pride parade in Auckland as the police are forced to intervene and the local mayor condemns alleged thuggery. So this is a Haka being used for good. All right. So I'm going to play this. First of all, this Haka, it's all men. It's a Haka filled with men, and they're in the street here, and they're blocking a pride parade of a bunch of fags on the other side with like a big rainbow banner. It says Rainbow Pride on one side, and it's got it's all Haka guys on the other side. It looks like they've got some white guys in there. All right, I'm gonna mute it because we can't hear that. But anyway, the Auckland quote unquote police are in between them, and again, what rugby is to American football, these quote unquote police are to like NYPD or something. Like they're they've got their arms crossed, and they've got thin arms. It's a bunch of women. But anyway, it's just these retards doing this like. So it's a Christian group. Here's the thing. This is a Christian group doing this dance. This is like a pagan dance they were doing before they like cut out people's hearts and ate them or whatever the fuck. Like sacrifice them to their like bird god or whatever. If they're just like, this Christian group is just like, you know what? This gay stuff is so gay that we're actually bringing back devil worship to protest it. Like, it's honestly incredible. It's one of the cooler things I've ever seen. I mean, if you're just listening, like, it's they're getting like right up in the cops' faces. They're getting like 2 feet away from the police. Maybe they're like staring them down. They're doing the whole. I mean, it's a whole thing. Like, I'm an American, so I've never like sat and watched like a rugby match and had to watch all this happen. This is the most I've ever watched of a Haka dance right now with a big group. It looks like it's a good I don't know, at least 30 guys doing it. And these white cops, oh my god. It's just like native teens doing it in front of these white cops, and the white cops are just like, they've got to stand in the line between the fags and these guys. And then there's these white people on the sidelines, and then they're like, oh my goodness. So look, if you want to be gay too in the future, if you want your descendants to have a parade about men fucking other men in the ass, again, you need to bring the smallpox blankets. If you don't, you're going to have a war dance breaking up the pride parade. All right, that's enough of that. I mean, my message is, hey, this is a thing with conservatives, okay? This is a big problem conservatives have. You know, they're not open-minded. You see the Haka, you see it's the gayest thing in the world, and you think, I will never like this. But if you keep a little bit of an open mind, just a little bit of an open mind, you know, you just keep a tiny bit of an open mind, and something wonderful could happen. I mean, truly, something wonderful could happen. That's what's cool about these. That's what's cool. All right. All right, we'll move on. We'll move on. We've got more stories. Don't worry. Let's move on. Let's move back to a country that matters. Okay? Let's go back to prime time. Let's go back to something someone in the world actually cares about. A real country, the land of my birth, the United States of America, and not just the United States of America, but let's get in to Captain America. All right? Because there's a new Captain America movie out. Came out last week. All right, this is Captain America 4, I guess. I don't know. I mean, these movies. What do you even say about a Marvel movie? I mean, I'm not the audience for them. I don't care. I don't think about them. You know, if someone my age, and again, I'm in my mid 30s, if someone my age comes up to me and says, hey, I went and saw the new Marvel movie. I mean, what do I say to them? What I would say actually is like, hey, that's great, buddy. Did you go to the theater by yourself? Because I mean, if you're not like intellectually disabled, like I don't even know, you know, or if you have kids who want to see them, hey, that's great. I mean, who looks at these movies and thinks like, all right, so well, let me go back a second. So I watched these. I went through a big comic book phase just before most of the Marvel movies hit, and I watched a lot of them. And you know, like a lot of people, I think I was in my late teens when most of these came out. I think I had finished high school. I was in my late teens, so like very young adulthood, and it was like, wow, they're connecting these stories. Like, there's going to be a movie for each one of the Avengers, and then there's going to be an Avengers movie, and you're skeptical. Like, how, is that going to work out? Like, one of them's going to be a big flop, and then they'll just do a sequel to the successful one, and they won't really connect them, and they won't really make it. And then well, god dang it, they did it. They connected them all, and they made that first Avengers movie, and I remember thinking that was really cool at the time. Now, would I think it was cool today? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't care if it was all the same quality as it was then and it all came out now. No, I wouldn't be interested. But I don't think it's a bad thing. You know, I don't think I did anything wrong by liking it back then. Yeah, I was retarded, but I was also like 19. I mean, who cares? Like it was fine. They were fine. And then I watched to me it's like it all built up to the first Avengers movie. They did it, and they kind of completed the thought that they had. And then they were like, well, there's going to be we teased this big villain Thanos. And then they did all this stuff, and they did an Avengers 2. And I didn't watch like any of the movies leading up to Avengers 2, but I watched Avengers 2, which was Age of Ultron. I remember just watching it, like sitting in the theater, watching it, and I thought, this just kind of sucks. It's just not very interesting. The jokes aren't funny. I don't know if the jokes in the earlier movies were funny. I mean, it's like a thing now. We say, "Oh, Marvel quips," like when there's some cringe quip in something, we say, "Oh, it's a Marvel style quip," and it sucks my ass. I hate this. But I don't remember if those original movies, if the quips were just better, or just I wasn't sick of it yet, or what. But in the Age of Ultron, and that one, whether they were the same quality they always were or not, I didn't laugh at any of them. I didn't like them at all. The movie wasn't interesting. I don't remember anything that happened, and I didn't care. And then I never watched another Marvel movie. And again, I'd already skipped everything leading up to the second Avengers movie, which was maybe that was part of the problem or whatever. But I'm not going to watch 5 movies to get ready to watch the 6th movie. And if you're like really young, maybe you are. That's fine. But the Marvel universe, it seems to have run its course. I hope that it's run its course. I mean, you can't have people like me. Again, I was I think a late teen when these came out, and now I'm in my mid 30s. I mean, you're going to have little kids who had these on their birthday cakes as they enter adulthood. Are they going to keep watching movies from the same series? Does that make sense for them? It doesn't, right? Like eventually Power Rangers goes away. Eventually you're embarrassed to like no matter how big the marketing campaign is, no matter how normalized it seems, eventually you hit a certain age and you're just going to be like, yeah, I'm 22 and I don't want to see, Thor 7. Thor 7 is not that interesting to me, right? But anyway, we're on the new Captain America. It came out. I think it actually had a pretty good opening weekend, but fell off after that because it's like, it's Captain America, but it's not the actor. It's just some black guy instead. And the black guy was in some Disney Plus show, which is another thing. They just made Marvel Disney Plus shows where they assume you've watched like a whole season of some TV show before you go watch the movie. Well, like I can't be asked to watch even the movies that lead to the movies, let alone the shows. And I mean Disney Plus. I mentioned a few episodes ago, like I met my first person who was paying for Disney Plus, and I couldn't even believe it. I was like, "What? Someone paid for Disney Plus?" But people do. People pay for Disney Plus, and people still watch Marvel movies. It had a pretty good opening weekend. But this one seems like it's not good. Maybe notably not good. Okay, so we've got an article from Vulture. Uh-oh. Another article from Vulture. That got me in trouble. All right, let's see if I can really get kicked off YouTube by reading another Vulture article, because I did get a community guidelines warning for talking about what Neil Gaiman did to those ladies, which is just the news. I shouldn't have got that warning. But I was reading from a Vulture article, and that's what did it. Okay, so this Vulture article, quote, "I think everyone knew this is probably not going to be a good film." So that's the headline here, because this is a piece that has a long excerpt at the end from a crew member of this film who was basically saying, like, yeah, it sucked my ass, this movie. I worked on it and it sucked ass, is pretty much what he said. Okay. On Valentine's Day, Captain America: Brave New World swoops onto more than 4,000 screens. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Let's get to some fun quotes here. I had one because this one's about a black hero and an evil president who turns red. Right? Oh, I wonder what that could be. What they could be getting at with that. Okay. According to a technical crew member on Captain America: Brave New World who was present on set and has knowledge of the film's post-production process, Disney is all too aware of its potential liabilities. On the heels of disastrous test screenings last year that necessitated a lengthy 22 days of reshoots, the 11th hour edition of a new supervillain, played by Giancarlo Esposito, major sequences being cut, and the film's release date being punted from February last year. In particular, Harrison Ford's Red Hawk / Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross character created uncomfortable political resonances. Did it? A demagogic military leader who transforms into a rampaging orange-skinned superhuman, the character shares unmistakable traits with Donald Trump. Okay, now, let me ask you this, because I read this sentence and I knew exactly what they meant. I understand why they wrote the sentence. I think a lot of everyone would just nod their heads in agreement and say, of course. But okay, when you think of Donald Trump, and even if you hate Trump, right? Even if you're a big critic of Trump, a demagogic military leader? Trump's not a military guy at all. Okay. In fact, he's also like this war in Ukraine, he's ending it. He's getting criticized for ending wars. It's like there's like this lingering idea that of the Republican warmonger or something, and they have to like duct tape that idea like onto Trump. Which, if you want to criticize him for ending the war, you don't like him ending the war. That's fine. But a demagogic military leader. Okay, a demagogic military leader who transforms into a rampaging, orange-skinned superhuman. Does Trump rampage? Trump doesn't even get into a rage. Like, I've never seen Trump angry at all. It's like not one of his traits. You know, you can say that Trump is like he's thin-skinned, he's nihilistic, he's this, he's that. I mean, he's catty. He doesn't even fly into a rage. He gets like catty. He gets into to Twitter spats with people. He's not some raging, roided up Republican warmonger guy. Like, that's not who he is. I mean, so okay, but they say the character shares certain unmistakable traits with Trump. To be sure, the reshoots took place last summer, long before the president was certain of becoming POTUS 47. But in recognition of what one insider calls an increasingly politicized environment, Disney changed the sequel's original title from Captain America: New World Order to the comparatively anodyne Brave New World. Indeed, in July, the studio altered a theatrical trailer featuring footage of an assassination attempt on the Ross character out of sensitivity about a deadly attempt on Trump's life earlier the same month. All right, so this is also really ignoring another big part of this movie. There's a character in the comics who is an ally of Captain America, or sometimes works with him, who is like an Israeli. She's an Israeli soldier. I think she's like a full-on like IDF soldier turned like hero. And she was in this movie. And it was all like written and planned before October 7th. And then I think they had to like rewrite it so she's like barely in it, or she's not even Israeli anymore or something. So this article is totally ignoring that. Okay. Let's see if we get kicked off YouTube here. The Harrison Ford character, also in a controversial scene, holds down the Anthony Mackie Captain America character and fucks him in the ass with a stick of butter. All right, so we'll see if we're still on YouTube. That is what got us kicked off last time. I hope that doesn't happen. No, but really continuing here. Continuing here, we've got the actual quotes from the guy who was working on it. Working on the reshoots. Let's see. When the studio had its test in front of an audience, it didn't respond. So again, this is someone who actually worked on the movie. When the studio had its test in front of an audience, it didn't respond. Maybe they don't want to see anything political in an election year. Maybe they were divided on who they were voting for. General Ross reads as an allusion to Trump. He's this very powerful general who becomes a kind of fascist and turns into a raging Red Hawk. Now, again, when you think of Trump, Trump had no military background before he became president. I mean, I think he went to like a military high school, which is, not really affiliated with the U.S. military. It's just like how they run the school. But he was a businessman. He was like a symbol of New York. He was just a Northeastern businessman. And then he was a public figure. He was on The Apprentice. So he's not some military general who then ran for president or something. Okay. He's this very powerful general who becomes a kind of fascist and turns into a raging hawk. And again, he doesn't rage. So he's not a military guy, and he doesn't rage. So I don't know why this would make people think of Trump, except for it being the president and being orange. So whether they meant it to be like that or not, I just don't understand the association. All right, this is my opinion, but I think Disney was realizing, hey, we've been bleeding for a while. Let's try not to piss off our core base any more than we have been over the last couple of years. They know you're going to lose a lot of your audience that way. Yeah, you are going to lose a lot of your audience that way. Because that sucks. You fucking suck. All right. One more thing about Captain America. One more thing that sucks my ass is listen to this. So this was back in January 28th. This is Anthony Mackie, who's the new black Captain America. All right, listen to him. Listen to what he says. He says that he's on stage. He was interviewed or something about being the new Captain America. Listen to what he says. Listen to this.
For me, Captain America represents a lot of different things, and I don't think the term, America should be one of those representations.
To me, Captain America represents a lot of different things. And I don't think America is one of those things. Huh? What? Captain America represents a lot of things. Not America, but a lot of things. What? An important part of like being alive and interacting with the world around you is having an understanding of meaning, of what things mean. Having a president who wants to end a crazy, violent war is a lot different from having a warmongering president who flies into rages and becomes a monster. And having a character whose name is Captain America means that he represents America. That's like literally what it means. Yeah, I'm playing Superman in the new movie, and Superman represents a lot of things, but being super is not one of them. To me, Spider-Man represents a lot of things. You know, responsibility and courage and working through difficult situations. Not being a spider. No, the Spider-Man has nothing to do with spiders. Superman has nothing to do with being super. I mean, what the fuck are these people talking about? By the way, I know I'm retarded for having any interest in these things at all. I know that like the best thing for me would be to just see that there's a headline about Captain America or the guy who played Captain America being retarded and just not read it. That would be better. I know it would be better. I know I'm fucking up right now. Okay? I know. Like these are mind viruses designed to make you crazy. Whether you go watch them all or whether you complain about them all. And I've done good barely talking about Marvel movies for the last, I don't know, 10 years. I've probably talked about a Marvel movie like a handful of times, but I really just can't resist looking at them and hoping that they fail these days. It's not even like a culture war thing. Like, there's going to continue to be gay bullshit and culture war shit and everything. It's just these movies have to stop. It's just got to stop. For God's sakes, just fucking call it. Captain America's not doesn't mean America. You know, like okay, fine. Like I know you believe that, but you used to have movies that were making $1 billion, so you'd shut up about it a little bit. Is it like you know this one sucks ass, so you just say whatever you want now? All right, moving on. Let's get to something important. Archaeologists find a pharaoh's tomb, the first since King Tut's, Egypt says. The Ministry of Antiquities said the discovery of the tomb of Thutmose II, whose wife Hatshepsut took the throne after his death, was the first excavation of a royal tomb near the Valley of the Kings since 1922. I don't think I pronounced either of those names correctly, but who cares? All right, they've got a new tomb in the Valley of the Kings, which, hey, I don't want to criticize. I'm not an archaeologist, but listen. It's called the Valley of the Kings, and you find the new one there. If I landed with no archaeology background, in Egypt, and they said, "Hey, you've got 6 months to find one more pharaoh, and it hasn't been found since 1922. You've got 6 months, or we're going to kill you and kill your family. Go." You know where I would start looking? The Valley of the Kings. Okay, I mean, what were these people doing there this whole time since 1922? You're telling me you can't find more kings in the Valley of the Kings? Come on, get it together. That's ridiculous. But anyway, we've got a new pharaoh. We found a new pharaoh. The newly identified tomb belonged to Thutmose II, who is believed to have reigned around 1480 BC. It was the last missing royal tomb of the 18th dynasty, the Egyptian ministry said in a statement. So, I mean, can you put yourself in this situation? You land in Egypt, they say, hey, there's one missing royal tomb from the 18th dynasty. And you say, fellas, Fellas, have you checked the Valley of the Kings? And everyone around, they make you king of Egypt for that. They go, oh my God. They're smacking their heads. Of course! The Valley of the Kings! All right, well, let's get into the comment section. That's what really matters when we're doing the New York Times. It's the comment section. Okay, number 2 in readers' picks from Expatriate. Was there a curse associated with opening this tomb? If so, that would certainly explain the rest of the news. Now, I know that this is not a real expatriate, like who would be on X, which would be a MAGA retard, a Capitol storming type guy. I know that this is a New York Times reader. So what they mean by the other news that's so apocalyptic is like Trump firing people in the federal government who aren't loyal to him. But again, kind of like the Haka, kind of like keeping an open mind. Let's move to our next story. Will that asteroid strike Earth? Risk level rises to highest ever recorded. The threat from space rock 2024 YR4 has surpassed that of Apophis, an asteroid feared by scientists 20 years ago. The danger remains low, but experts are estimating the damage that could be done. All right, so here's what happens. The Egyptian government, they're sitting on this Valley of the Kings. They know where all the goods are. They know it's the Valley of the Kings. I mean, how could you not? But they've got to play dumb, okay? Because they know that there's some bad shit in there, all right? And then you get some asshole, some Westerner goes over there. He goes, fellas, I know where the kings are, baby. You want the kings, you got to go to the Valley of the Kings. Now, look what's happening. They're cracking tombs open. We got asteroids on the way. It's no good. This is why the nations should be separate. This is why I don't believe in diversity. I don't believe in immigration, even though I do live abroad. I except for me, for my case, where it kicks ass, then it's okay. It's okay. But look, the country I'm in, I'm not asking where their ancient kings are buried. All right? It's none of my business. Hey, if they want them to stay buried, stay buried. All right? We don't need any asteroids. All right? This isn't Final Fantasy VII. All right, and all the comments are what you'd expect for this story. It's all the comments about this asteroid coming and killing everyone are about how Trump is bad. Like first comment in the reader picks, don't worry, all of the people responsible for hunting, tracking, studying, and or otherwise preparing for a direct hit have been fired. So it will be a quick death for all of us. Third comment. If 2024 YR4 turns out to be 300 feet long, Michael F. Tosmas, an expert at the Asteroid Threat Assessment Project, said its impact could cause, oh sorry, this project has been cut and I have been fired. Sorry, you're on your own. Wow, so clever. Great comment. With all Trump is doing, finally some good news. The end is near. These are the comments. These are the people reading the story about the asteroid. Hey, people reading the story about the asteroid, I want you to think really, really hard. Okay, think for a minute. Is there anyone close to Trump who is good at developing space technology? Anyone close to Trump who's in charge of a company that's taken the mantle from NASA for high tech high-tech space vehicles. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think it'll be fine. It'll all be fine. If the asteroid hits, you know, hey, can you imagine a Republican newspaper, a right-wing newspaper, and they're like, the comment section is like, hey, I hope the asteroid hits the faggots. I bet the asteroid's coming to kill all the fags. I mean, that's the equivalent of what they're doing here. Like if the asteroid, like the one from 20 years ago, it's like they're like, oh yeah, well, that's coming because gay marriage just went through. You know, the Supreme Court approved gay marriage, and yeah, now there's an asteroid. Big surprise. That's the equivalent of what these people are doing. They're exactly the same, but in their minds, they're like way more clever than that. They're way smarter, and they kick ass. All right, last story in the Atlantic. The Atlantic here. There's a term for what Trump and Musk are doing. How regime change happens in America by Anne Applebaum. And this story is all about how everything in the federal government was actually great. It was actually like wonderful, like civil servants. Like it's crazy what's in this article. And I looked up this Anne Applebaum because I'd definitely seen her name before. She's all about how like NATO is good, the EU is good, and this is all about how the federal government was great, and these were like noble civil servants, like serving a higher cause. All right, I'm going to start reading an excerpt here. Until January 20th, American civil servants worked according to a different moral code. Federal workers were under instructions to respect the rule of law, venerate the Constitution, maintain political neutrality, and uphold lawful policy changes, whether they come from Republican or Democrat administrations. They were supposed to measure objective reality, evidence of pollution, for example, and respond accordingly. Not all of them were good administrators or moral people, but the damage that any one of them could do was limited by audits, rules about transparency, and, again, an ethos built around the rule of law. This system was accepted by everyone: Republican voting FBI agents, Democrat voting environmental officers, the nurses at veterans hospitals, the air traffic controllers at LAX. All right. So there are so many assumptions baked into this. It's pretty mind-boggling here. But I'll start with what she says at the end. This system was accepted by everyone: Republican voting FBI agents, Democratic voting environmental officers. Republican voting FBI agents hated Trump and continue to hate him. The whole problem with the state, the institutional state that Trump's trying to remake by implementing RAGE, the Curtis Yarvin retire all government employees idea, like everything he's trying to replace there, he's trying to replace the system that was full of Democrats and Republicans who were part of the Uniparty, who didn't do anything. And the Republican half of that coin, the FBI agents, they were a big part of the problem. Yeah, they're Republican, but they would never support Trump. I mean, remember those text messages going back and forth between those FBI agents saying how they can never let Trump become president back in the first term? Like, that's the entire problem. It's not like there's this broad coalition of people with different values who are there. And like they're all they're within the spectrum of left to right that's allowed on like cable news. But there's no one there with an actual, like, the darkness cannot comprehend the light. They all need to be fucking fired. They all suck. All right, and let's get into some of some of what she said here. Okay, they were supposed to measure objective reality, evidence of pollution, for example, and respond accordingly. There is so much waste, fraud, and abuse. Like, I remember getting into an argument with someone about this, where they were saying, well, it was decisions about like public health. They should be made by scientists and not by politicians. And I said, well, wait a second. The politicians are all corrupt because that's where the power is. So corrupting forces, they want to go give the politicians money or pussy or whatever to make things go their way. And you're saying, well, if we just move the power over to the scientists who measure objective reality, that'll all work well. No, it won't. The target of the corrupting forces will just change to the scientists. So this thing where like they're going to measure objective reality, these federal workers will do that. I guarantee you, every measurement that mattered, that affected money and power, was subject to corruption. Not just in this government, but in anything that human beings ever make ever. Like, I read this, I see these beliefs these people have. It's like looking into like a circulating newsletter of like a religion I don't belong to or something. Where they're like, of course, like because of the divine will of the Most High Presence, this was working just fine and wasn't corrupt. Like, what are you talking about? What do you like? The federal government, they can't all be fired and replaced by the democratically elected leader because of what? Because they were measuring pollution? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Okay, well, it'll be our guys measuring pollution. Well, that's subject to corruption. Oh, do you have specific examples of it being corrupt? Well, no, but there will be. Okay, well, there are now for your guys. So it will all be corrupt. You lost. You suck. You're gay. Okay, I think she had one more quote here. Yeah, one more I wanted to highlight here because this really, really, really chafed my ass. All right, so she's talking about how people working in the federal government who don't get fired can resist. And I'm going to end with this rant because this really sucks. Okay. Others will decide to cooperate with the new regime, collaborating, in effect, with an illegal assault, but out of patriotism. Much like the Ukrainian scientists who have kept the Zaporizhzhia whatever nuclear power plant going under Russian occupation because they fear catastrophe if they leave, some tech experts who work on America's payment systems and databases have stayed in place, even as Musk's team of very young, very inexperienced engineers has demanded illegitimate access. Yeah, you're right. Like staying in the Treasury Department to make sure that you're not audited is exactly the same as staying to work on a nuclear power plant in a war zone, so there's not a meltdown. Yeah, exactly the same. It's really equally as heroic, and that's real heroism. Real heroism is preventing an outside audit. Fuck you. All right. Look at this quote. So here's a quote from a government employee. Okay, listen to this. This one really gets me going too. Okay, going into these systems without an in-depth understanding of how they work both individually and interconnectedly is a recipe for disaster that will result in death and economic harm to our nation. Do you remember when Musk took over Twitter? Because I was going on, at that time, I had a habit of going on a site called Hacker News, just news.ycombinator.com, which is all where all the Silicon Valley people kind of hang out. And they are really, really knowledgeable, especially about like Silicon Valley things, because it's mostly just workers. It's mostly just people who are employed in the valley or in that industry, and they know it well. And the comment section is filled with like interesting. It's supposed to be about technical things, but of course, it's just filled with interesting gossip and stuff like that. And when Musk took over Twitter, he fired 80% of the staff, and the people there who are supposed to be the most well informed, the most intelligent people on this subject, all of them were saying like, Twitter is going to stop functioning. They're like, you won't be able to access Twitter in like a week because he fired 80% of the people, and he's taking out like one of the five core data centers or whatever to save money, and it's going to stop functioning. You literally won't be able to log into Twitter. The tweets won't tweet. It's all gone, is what they were saying. And this weren't like just because the New York Times was saying the same thing, and so was their comment section. But that you could just ignore. The people on this site who actually knew something, they were all saying this too. And I actually thought, wow, that might happen. Not only did it not happen, but Twitter continues to ship new features all the time. And the problems it has now are like still the same problems it used to have. But like it didn't degrade at all. In fact, like there's the AI, there's the image generation. You can like those or not like those, but there's like the video uploads. Spaces are still going strong. Spaces happened before Musk took over, but still that's like a technically difficult thing. It's not just text, and it's all still going. And now Musk is taking over the federal government and auditing it and firing people, and you're getting quotes like this. It's like, well, actually, this is really complicated, and if you don't understand how this works, then it's all going to fall. No, it's not. It's all bullshit, and it can all be shut down, and you can just replace it with better things that cost 80% less. God, I fucking hate these people. Anyway, that's been my fun, light, little talking cat comedy podcast today. It's not a comedy podcast, I know that, but yeah, I am getting a little ridiculous sometimes. I'm going to go. I'm going to end this before I give myself a heart attack. All right, everybody. Thank you.